Hey guys, so we'll be starting now. First of all, let me introduce Mr. Chuang. Mr. Chuang has been recognized by Andreessen Horowitz as the Silicon Valley CEOs of CEOs. He is the founder and chairman of Magnet Systems, which is a next generation mobile and web platform company that is also the provider of Magnet Beauty. Also known for being the co founder and CEO of BA Systems, he led BA Systems to acquisition by Oracle for a whopping $8.6 billion. dollars. Currently, Mr. Chong is the general partner at Race Capital, a venture capital firm. He is a proud Hong Kong entrepreneur and alum of Wang Yan College at Hong Kong. He received his Bachelor of Science in Computer Science from the University of San Francisco and a master's degree in computer science with specialization in distributed data management at UC Davis. So he's also a UC Davis alum. He he has many awards under his wings, like CF Silicon Valley Philanthropist of the Year, SD Forum Visionary Award, CIO Magazine 2020 Vision Award, and many more. Currently, he is an independent advisor at the University of San Francisco School of Engineering 2020, member of UC Davis's Chancellor Advisory Board, member of UC Davis School of Engineering Dean's Committee, member of the School of Business Dean's Committee, City University of Hong Kong, and member of the School of Engineering Industrial Advisory Committee, Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. So he's a very busy guy, and I would like to thank him for taking out time for us this evening.
Thank you, Shavya. And I'm just going to make a couple of remarks. And first of all, when I saw you send me an email and said Davis actually has a entrepreneurship society, I jumped on the opportunity to spend time with you guys. And I want to thank you and obviously all of your board members, Sadid, Kanal, for putting this together. And it really is my pleasure. So I used to lecture a class that Dean Curtis from the engineering school used to teach entrepreneurship, but obviously I haven't done that since we've been locked down. So it's really a delight to see all you guys, and I'll tell you more about why it's crucial for we really have to start creating entrepreneurial type work within the university because I'm funding a bunch of them in other schools. So I'm dying to take a bunch of projects that you guys are working on and make them into commercial companies.
Thank you so much. And again, we would just like to extend our our joy for it. Can you? Yeah, sorry. And as a UC Davis alum, I guess there's a lot more that that connects us. So if you want, we can just jump into the questions that we have for you from the board, and then we'll move on to questions from the audience. So from us, the board, our first question to you is. How important is it to have a mentor when it comes to entrepreneurship?
Well, by default, entrepreneurship is something that you will personally lead and start. You don't have to become a CEO if you don't want to. These days, entrepreneurship is very broad. You could be an engineer and you could want to continue to write code, or you could be an inventor, you could be a designer. There are many aspects of entrepreneurship, but nevertheless, it's a very lonely job because most of the people ended up by default, if you create a company, they'll be reporting into you or they will be in the organizations below you. So it's hard to go get advice from people. It's hard to go get reflection, on how you're doing and ask for feedback. It's very difficult to do. And I think one of the most difficult things is as times you're going to feel you're extremely stuck. You're going to be having trouble fundraising. You could be having trouble with a product. You could be having people's problem. It's great to have a mentor as a sounding board. And I think people generally think the mentor has to qualify, has a bunch of qualification. I actually don't think that. I advise a lot of people, and through the 20 some odd years that I've been investing in the small startups in tech, I inherited a lot of CEOs, CTOs, and chief product officers that have become my friends. And they oftentimes spend time with me. Some of the largest, most successful companies, some of them have gone public, we still spend time, because a lot of times I don't actually have to say anything. It's just sitting there and listening is crucial. So this is something I definitely would advise. So actually on top of that, one of the things that I often tell people, I said, I have built companies with co-founders. I've also built companies on my own. There's no doubt in my mind there was a whole lot more fun when you have co-founders you can actually start the business with, and you can see it grow. Actually, one of my co-founders at BA had recently passed away. He passed away because he had cancer. The thing that I remember the most, that I cherished the most, was the very early days that we only have a few people. And every day we'd be sitting in a lunchroom having lunch together and having a casual conversation about many things. As the company grew, BA became a very large company. We lost kind of that stuff. So co-founders is also one of the very important things. Just look at this specific organization. You guys have co-founders, you guys have board members, so you can share, you can brainstorm, you can pick who you want to bring onto the show. It's a wonderful experience. So think about this, and there's no better place to recruit co-founders when you're in a university, because this is like the ultimate pool of resources that you can tap from. And they don't have to be in the school that you're in. They could be in business school. They can be in, I don't know, nursing school for that matter. So, yeah.
So then would you say that, like, more than having a mentor is just having support of people around you that is more important for your entrepreneurship?
Oh, absolutely. And the mind is a fragile thing. And having people that reassure that you are doing good and you're doing the right thing, you're pointing at the right direction, and that's super critical. All of us need some encouragement at times.
Okay. Now, so when I think about it in that way, it's the first thing that comes in my mind is that even you have co-founders whom you can, like, deal with the problems of the company with, and you also have friends and family, etc., who are not really part of your organization, but they can still go home and, like, tell them that, listen, I had a really frustrating day at work, and they'll be like, oh yeah, do you want to talk about it? And I feel like both of them are really important to your journey as an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. I'm going to tell you guys as a secret. When I used to go to the office, I have a ritual. Every day when I was heading home, whether it's 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m., I will call my mom. I'll talk to my mom maybe for 5 minutes, for 10 minutes, or sometimes for an hour. And then these days, actually, because I'm trapped at home, I'm doing a little bit less. But I have the ritual of calling my mom on a very regular basis. People will say, really? I say, oh, yeah. So my mom definitely was an insider when we were a public company, because I told her a lot of stuff. She was one of my best sounding board, right? So, and then I think about it, right? Who else is going to find? It's always going to be supportive of what you do. So think of it in that context. So the less you feel that you're alone, I think you're going to have a much higher chance of success.
Thank you so much for the answer to this question. It's really something to think about, and honestly, like, I feel like when it comes to entrepreneurship, we should all learn that it's that being alone is not necessarily the most fun thing. So moving on to our next question, it's a little more personal to your journey as an entrepreneur. So if you could do one thing differently in your entire journey, what would you do?
Yeah, I have to be honest. There's a long list of things I would do differently, because you live and learn, and and I have worked at large companies, as and climbed the ladder as an employee. So I worked at Sun Microsystem for 9 years, and then I founded my own company with 2 co-founders, and then grew it very large. And I had done every single job possible in the company itself, and then I have founded a company on my own. I've invested in over 100 tech companies. Now I'm a venture capitalist. I'm doing this full time. I would say, if I look back in my career, I wish there were a few things I would do differently. I tell you a very interesting thing of how, out of my lens, when I wake up in the morning, for the longest time in the world, I would say, why everything is moving in slow motion? So I'm a very impatient guy. So I said, why is everything moving so slowly? Why can't we just do it immediately, right? Like, why building a product now with 100 people takes this long, right? Would it be better that I should just go write a code, And I was a decent programmer, And it's just how would these people perform so poorly? And for a long time, I work insane hours, only sleep 4 hours. And I really couldn't put myself in other people's shoes. And I happen to be a young entrepreneur. So when I became CEO, I was in my 30s. And when I became a vice president at Sun, I was in my 20s. So I was really young. And the problem with being young is you don't have those experiences. So when you have those experiences, you look back and you say, I wish I was more patient. And I wish I was more understanding. Number two, which is a very important thing, I look back in my life, I say, most of the time I was way too critical. And I would say most of my BEA employees, which over 30,000 people gone for this company, when we sold it, 6,000 people. They would say, Alfred was a very critical man. And I was super critical of myself constantly, right? Because, you got into this business, you start from zero. Eventually our revenue grew to $1.7 billion a year. So in that journey, we were competing with people like Microsoft, we're competing with people like IBM. So I couldn't wait, and I didn't have those kind of patience. I was so critical of why we're not even winning faster and topple IBM faster. We were actually, I look back, I said, well, we did a very good job. I mean, we really gave IBM a run for their money. We certainly gave Oracle a run for their money to a point where they chased us and chased us, eventually wanted to buy the company. But I said, sometimes I was just too harsh because I was so critical of everything. So when I love to learn. So I moved from a CTO kind of role into a head of engineering kind of role, then into running marketing, product management. And eventually I moved into sales. I ran sales for the company, redesigned the whole sales organization. And each one of them, I was super curious, but I was critical because I couldn't put myself always in other people's eye, other people's lens. So I wish I would do that differently. And I think 3 is one of the things we all have to live and learn. That was actually, I was just listening to a very good podcast on Clubhouse that was between Ben Horowitz, so from Andreessen Horowitz, very good friend of mine, and Ali Ghoshi. Is the CEO of Databricks. I know him very well. And they had a very good conversation about a variety of different things of being the boss. And one thing they did bring up, and I wish totally agree with them, was about hiring. So a lot of times I am like everybody else, right? So when you go first meet your new friends, you fall in love really fast. And you think everything possible about a person. So hiring up, by the way, is the same. You can't wait to hire the person because this is a checklist on your to-dos. And and this is a critical role for the company. You have to fill it. So you're dying to do whatever it takes to fill the role. So, and the person who's interviewing clearly is obviously in the best behavior, right? So you will ignore all the signs of things that are not right because you're in a rush. I would say these 3 things between, me being more patient, 2 is less critical, 3 is still get better at hiring, are the 3 top things that I think if I have learned, and it's things that I think it's really, I wanted to continue to improve. I wanted to be the best at it. And it's almost impossible, so that's really, and by the way, amazingly, as an engineer, my whole life is not the engineering problem that I wish I would have done better. Those actually, it turns out, was quite easy. It's the other stuff, the soft stuff, that was much more difficult.
Okay. So again, thank you for the answer. And when I listen and analyze what you learned from your journey, I can see that a lot of it has to do with people in general. Being impatient, it directly impacts people. Being critical directly impacts people, and hiring also directly impacts people. So I think that is a very nice segue into our next question. So, what does entrepreneurship mean to you, and do people have any importance in that definition?
Actually, this is a great question. Actually, entrepreneurship is just about people. It's amazingly, idea is important, and being able to take it to market is important. But nothing like entrepreneurship mostly is about grouping people into an organization and achieving a set of goals. And to me, what it really means is it's everything. I have dedicated my whole life into thinking, refining, coaching, learning about entrepreneurship, because I'm very lucky, and I think many of you are also, because in a technology field, It's unlike anything else. You literally can invent a technology and a company to bring it to the marketplace and see it to flourish and dominates the market. And yet then you can also see it goes to its end of life and then see birth of a new technology that will replace what you have just done. So, in my lifetime, I'm already at my third or fourth major round of this. So almost no other industry, let's say you're in transportation or you're in healthcare or you're in education. Yeah, I mean, there are changes at UC Davis, but it's not monumental. By and large, structurally, our syllabus, our organizational managing the school has been the same, but not in technology. Technology is almost dramatic. So this also means it's a nonstop reinvention. That's it's almost the ultimate form of entrepreneurship. So it's almost any time and place you can think of, you can restart the whole thing, right? And you can eliminate and in life the stuff that we think of is the state-of-the-art technology. That part of it is truly, it's just, to me, it's completely amazing. I mean, most of the beginning of my career was doing network-based Unix, right? BSD Unix. And it's by and large gone. Everything is now run on the cloud, right? You tap into Amazon, AWS, GCP, or Microsoft Azure. You have instant access to basically the entire stack. You don't even need, any physical computer. So for an entrepreneur, let's say for a software person, it's almost instantaneous that you can actually start writing code and creating a product. In my early days, oh my God, you have to first raise millions of dollars to be able to afford all these, expensive computers to even start anything. So I think for me, the entrepreneurship, what it meant to me is creation. I mean, this is a never-ending creation and selling and attracting the smartest people and the most talented people to be working with you. And in every aspect of it, never-ending, like a tornado. It's just, to me, that's what it is. I'm so addicted to you, to the entrepreneurship thing. I think I'm going to die in it. Like someday I don't think I have the capability of retiring, stopping, and all any kind of that kind of things, right? So and for me, if I don't get to pound the 12 hours a day in, it just I feel I miss something, right? I'm short something in a day.
Okay, so so then would you say that more than having knowledge of technical things like engineering and stuff like that, soft skills like innovation, like creativity and communication are more important when it comes to entrepreneurship?
Oh, by the way, what you find in entrepreneurship, so I'm going to be direct, right? So number one thing, in order to make any idea into high, you be able to proliferate and you be able to sell it, you're going to need capital, you're going to need resource. So the first thing you're going to have to do is to go sell. And be able to pitch and be able to astonish people and be able to make people believe is number one thing. I mean, like we all sit here and admire incredibly talented people like Steve Jobs, right? I'm one of the lucky people. I've seen how he rehearsed on stage. In my days at Sun, we actually launched a product with him. This guy has his footstep taped on the stage. So it looks like it's all natural, but everything was rehearsed to the tilt, including how he walked on the stage itself. Everything is well remembered, well greased to a point where he knows he hit it. It's a performance. So those are the things that we think, oh, we invented fire. Therefore, people will just come and buy it, or people will come fund us. Sometimes it happens, but don't count on it. So communication is probably the most important thing in entrepreneurship, right? So that means you have to be a good writer, you have to be prolific, you have to be fast, you have to be comfortable now, because we have so many communication tools. On my desk, I got Slack, I have Signal, I have Clubhouse, I have WhatsApp, I have iMessage. I mean, like, oh my God, it never stopped ringing. So those are crucial things that you have to be able to good at, because each one of them, people use it differently. They know, are you a native of it or not, right? So those are super critical stuff. So communication, I can't emphasize enough how important that is in entrepreneurship.
Okay. Um, so again, thank you for that answer. And at the same time, even I feel like communication is important, even when it comes to teams itself, because people just know you on the surface, but communication unlocks you to a deeper extent, and it just builds more of the like it builds more unity and solidarity, and it helps the company grow, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Uh, so
But by the
then,
way, I want to add one point.
yeah, sure.
One thing people sometimes short changes. When you create a company, maybe up to about 100 people, 200 people, you can use process and procedure to run the company. Once you exceed the 100 and 200 people, companies are run by culture. And culture generally are started by the founders, by the entrepreneurs themselves. So whatever that you are, it becomes a company. So if this is a happy company, you're a happy person, and you generally have a smile on your face, you're very positive in thinking, this has got to be a positive company. But if you're a very negative person, right, and you are constantly grumpy all the time, this will become a really grumpy company. That's just kind of how it goes. So don't think that soft skills are not going to be critical. Communicating is critical, right? But those gestures, because everyone below you are looking at you all the time to say, "Ooh, is he in a good mood? Why is he not in a good mood?" Right? So those are critical things.
Okay, so once you cross 200 people, the company becomes more of a reflection of who you are, like of how people see you.
Absolutely.
So okay, and now if we move more into the point you mentioned about like rehearsing and how entrepreneurship is putting on like a performance, how has that performance changed, or like how has marketing in general changed with the introduction of social media, like how people use apps differently? And so yeah, just your thoughts on that.
Obviously, that's well, I talked about there's a laundry list of very profound things that people generally have ignored.
Mhm,
When I go pitch people to invest in my venture fund,
mhm,
it's funny. I would say, well, they said, well, is technological change really that impactful? I said, well, since 2008, which was in May of 2008, we had a financial crisis.
mhm,
So between 2008 and when we march into March of 2020, when we march into the pandemic, 12 years has gone by, almost 12 years. You know what has been created and it become mainstream? Cloud computing, software as a service, our touch phone, right? The whole app economy, all these apps that we put on our phone, the whole gig economy, the Uber, right, the Airbnbs, and social network.
mhm.
All of those came about in the last 12 years. And the harder part to imagine is we march into the pandemic, right? Can we imagine we don't have any of those tools? So this is how critical is entrepreneurship in our world. If we don't keep doing this, right, we wouldn't have survived it. I mean, like, think about it, right? The last time the world had a pandemic was over 100 years ago when we had the Spanish flu.
Mhm.
They didn't have any other stuff. And you scratch your head and say, well, if they didn't have DoorDash, how did they get food, right?
Mhm.
I'm sure they got food, but I'm sure it's terribly tough, right? And
Mhm.
they didn't have cell phones to call people. So how do you know this person is sick? They write a letter, right? And the postman could be sick. So no wonder 50% get infected, 10% of the population died. But going back to your question, this is a forever evolving thing in marketing. So in the old days, marketing were done mostly through a press release, right?
Mhm.
And we have physical publications, and then some of those publications then became electronic format. But all of them were cumbersome, right? Because it's the lead time is long, right? And it's an event, but it's not time scaled, so it's not continuously is updating people. Um, this whole phenomenon that we have, which is mostly in communication, is magical because it allows us to have really not only up-to-date information, but now it's learning our behavior. So it knows what we want to hear. Now, this is obviously it's up to you guys to decide. Is that a great thing? Is that a bad thing? a lot of people will argue, shutting down President Trump's communication on Twitter, was it the right thing to do? Was it the wrong thing to do? What happened to freedom of speech? And who should decide, right? We found out that actually Trump really reported to Jack Dorsey and Mark Zuckerberg, right? Because at the end, when they shut him off, he was done. There was no way to communicate anymore, right? So those are very, very, that's how powerful they are. But I think we're about to see a major shift in our world where for the last 70 years or so, what I call a transaction, whatever we do, right? The way that we do this is we either fill out a form or we fill out a bunch of fields, and when we hit return, commit, and then it does the transaction. Whether you go to the bank, you order food from through DoorDash, whatever you do, you're paying for your tuition, you're traveling back to India. That's all we do. But I think this is rapidly moving into a whole new generation of how this is going to get done. Because now we'll be able to look at the entire data set in the world. And we can learn, right? So there's machine learning capability that we actually can learn from the data to know, can I really, really love these headphones, right? And then there's an accessory, which is a mic that you can extend to it, actually to clear up all of the noise behind you. And you know what? If you spend $200 on those headphones, you definitely have the propensity to buy it for $20. And then I'm going to pick, you haven't bought anything for a while. We know your savings pattern. I know you're going to pay, pull the trigger on that day. It kept learning. And eventually it has a recommendation to the system and say, you want to do it. And actually it does it for you. It shows up at your door. And all you have to do is say, I don't want it, you return it. It's the other way around. So this moving from a static transaction to an automated transaction is going to be happening most definitely soon in your lifetime. It's going to be very impactful. We haven't seen this type of impact forever. This is going to be one of the most monumental things. So let me give you one example. I'm going to come back to this thing. UC Davis Hospital was the first hospital that admitted the first COVID patient in California. Unfortunately, she died at the hospital. But how does a doctor, when a doctor walks in the ICU, what does the doctor do? The doctor looks at the chart. Sometimes it's electronic, sometimes actually it could be paper that the nurse has printed, it's on a clipboard. Can you imagine, right? And then they look at the vital signs on the machine and say, patient's still sick. Maybe I should just put in 0.1 milligram more of remdesivir into the drip. It's totally arbitrary. I mean, I'm not saying doctors not great, right? But it's more like an art. I much rather have, that's a big data learning. I'm learning all the patient with the same ethnicity, same underlying condition, same age group, right? With all the same reaction to the medication that I put in. And these are the results out in the next 3 days of what the patient is experiencing. And this is what the medication will work. And not only is learning from the patient, but compound learning from the whole world. And then it comes with a recommendation, ultimately derive a decision, and instill the medication directly into the patient. I tell you, not just because I'm a software engineer, I'm going to trust the software a whole lot more than some random dude walking in once a day and making a random decision and say, oh, I think this is good for you, right? That wouldn't make any sense, right? So from that kind of monumental change, you could see what impact we were about to see in terms of how things get marketed to us. So yeah, it can be like your dad or your grandfather's way of marketing. This got to be like that time scale got to be like so thin. It's continuously learning what you're interested in, what your customer is interested in, how do you advertise to them, what their reaction is, and turn it down to exactly what they need. And we will never get feedback to product like what we're getting now. So that's really big, right? And there's a lot more invention to be done on that side of the house also, of how to properly market and learn the behavior of the people buying things from you.
So we had a question on which industry do you see as the most growing in the coming years. So from your answer, I got that one industry would be like automation of things and learning from data sets and like coming up with the most optimal solution for things. So do you have any other industries that you feel?
I think that it is totally amazing. Whenever, by the way, it's interesting enough. Whenever there is a major crisis in the world, so obviously, in the 80s we have a stock crash, in 2000 we have the .com bubble bursting. In 2008, we have the financial crisis, and then in 2020, we had a pandemic. Generally, what happened in history is each time when we have a major crisis, coming out of the crisis, you see the most astonishing reinvention of the world in many aspects. So let's not talk about technology for a second, right? Let's talk about that last. Like education, for example, right? Education will never, ever go back to the way we were. I don't know how many times when I go to, Gary's board meeting and having a meeting with them, obviously there are lots of very experienced and incredible people in the room. And they will ask me, so Alfred, you're the tech guy. So what do you think the world is heading to? I said, well, I can tell you, the days of getting onto some bus, commuting for 2 hours and going to the office, and then spending 8 to 9 hours, right, in a noisy place with a bunch of people, and you think you're productive, you get back on the bus for 2 hours, it's over. We won't be doing that anymore. That obviously would be led by tech. So this is the secret I'm going to tell you guys. Tech's never going to be going back to the office. They're just not saying it, but they're not. No one is going to be. And almost all the company I'm funding, they're fully decentralized, right? They start the company assuming the people are never going to be in one single place. And I can't even tell, right? I have to ask. If one of you, Xavier, you're in India, how would I know, right? I wouldn't know, So that's how great it is, because now we have so much more leverage with the labor. So just in education alone, right? So think about the profound change is going to have to go through. 30% of the universities likely over the next 5 to 10 years will go out of business in this country. It's very simple. Look at the way they charge, right? Most private university charge upwards of $60,000, $70,000 a year, including room and board, right? What experience are they giving you? On-campus experience, right? So if you can't go on the campus, their operating model don't work. They won't survive. So they just can't do it, right? So they rely on people eating on the campus. They are boarding on the campus, right? And the activities are on the campus. And that's how they charge their premium to be able to sustain the whole operations of the place. If the school is virtual, they won't make it. My son happens to go to one of these schools where they're not going to make it. They have 2,500 students for the whole school, fraction of the size of our engineering school at UC Davis. So it'd be very tough to imagine how would they, if they don't really go on and reinvent themselves, how would they survive this? And the tools that we use now, right, are very rudimental tools, right? So imagine the stuff that's being created at a UC Davis versus the tools that the school has for running the school itself. It's still very old school. Those going to need a lot of revamping to be able to much better cater to the activities of the students. Look at how much more projects we're working on. Everything is project-based, right? It's not really you get lectured and then you take a test. We don't do that stuff anymore. So much of the effort has gone into having practical experience. So before you even actually enter into the workplace, people are seeking you out because you already have that experience. So we will have to change all kinds of tooling in the school itself to cater to that. So EdTech, big, super big, because for survival's sake, anybody wants to be in that 70%, they have to reinvent itself. And many reinventions happening in the UC, definitely at UC Davis, right? Because we have that kind of scale to do it. Healthcare. The most astonishing thing that I personally have experienced is godsend. So now, almost all the hospitals and doctors have received, they're onto that third HIPAA waiver. So for the longest time, because of complaints in healthcare, you're not allowed to do things like, I put a picture, I have a glaucoma in my left eye. So you have to go to the doctor and they will have to use a machine to take pictures and the doctor have to use a lens to look at you. So I'm a curious guy. So I said, I looked at those pictures, I said, there's no big deal. I can take a picture like that. So I bought a special lens and I took a bunch of pictures and I put it in Google Picture and sent a link to my doctor. And now they're allowed to open those pictures. Before the waiver, they couldn't. And then they prescribe medication. I said, that's a way for the future of medicine. Are we kidding? Why do we need to go see the doctors for, right? These simple things, we can measure our temperature, right? We know our blood pressure. Why do I have to go see the doctors for? So it changed the context of medicine in a big way. So I think that's waiting for reinvention, especially we're constrained a lot in the Information Act. So I'm very much focused on finding companies that are enabling that to happen, like because those information are highly private, right? Because they're patient data. But like the example that I talked about, we need learning to be on every patient, but you don't need to know who the person is, where they're located at, right? Exactly who they are. You just need to know the medical history so they can derive an answer so they can apply it on their patient. So with that in mind, right, we need technology to be able to encrypt those data, but still be able to crawl it, learn from it, and be able to express the results and share it. So there's so many aspects of this now intersecting with technology and the way that we do things, the process. So I think healthcare, majorly in reinvention. I mean, just on the vaccine alone, generally to invent and get FDA approval for flu vaccine, a decade or decades long. This one took months. You know what? Humans have flexibility. When we're desperate, we do incredible things, right? You can't. By the way, we never have flu vaccine that have anything more than 50% effective rate. Never have, right? Influenza vaccine. This vaccine is 90+%. Like this is insane. This kind of invention happens because we put our minds to it, right? Because we're desperate and we bypass so many of the rules. But because rules are compound, right? So when we invent rules, we pass on to the next generation, pass to the next generation. Some of them not even relevant, but we don't change it, right? This is time to make a lot of change.
Okay, so so before we move on to the audience questions, I would just like to say that so according to you, the next the next 5 or 10 years would just be the age of reinvention for industries and moving into what we would call the new normal, which is like, okay, you can work from home, distance doesn't matter, and stuff like that.
Well, obviously, I'm going to be selfish for a second. Tech obviously going to be remarkable again for this next decade. And people ask me and say, well, will it, I talked about all the stuff that invented between 2008 and 2020. They said, will it be as exciting as the past 12 years? I said, it won't be. It'll be many times of the last 10, 12 years and those 10 years before that combined. Because now we know how powerful they are. And the smarter that we are, right? And the less code that we have to write, because we have a lot more supporting code below it, the faster we can actually get to where we needed to. So tech, data, collaboration, it's digital banking, how we're going to be managing open source. I mean, there's so many aspects of tech, robotics, autonomous vehicle, LiDAR, right? Battery technology. So, now we have fully assumed, the world's going to have all non-emission generating car by 2035, right? We're not going to be selling any more combustion car. But the electric car is still heavy. So we still have work to do to reduce its weight, to get high efficiency. So there's still more things to work on. So, but tech is going to be, wow, holy, my God. I can't even imagine what it'd be like in 10 years.
So thank you so much for your insights on our questions. So I'm going to pass the mic, pass control over to Shevya, and you can ask the audience questions. So yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
It was really insightful hearing all of that great stuff from you. Well, the audience have quite a few questions. So one of the first questions that the audience has is, how does your fund ensure a stable treasury?
How do, let's see,
the fund in your venture capital ensure a stable treasury? You don't go bankrupt. That's one of the questions.
Let me make sure I understand. How do my fund do what? Say it again. Okay. You have low static on your end. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry for that. Yeah. How does your fund ensure a stable treasury?
Stable
treasury.
Treasury. Okay.
Treasury.
Yeah. So so let me talk a little bit about what my fund does. Okay. So and what kind of activities I'm working on. It's actually very interesting, and this is something actually I want to talk to you guys about. So lately, so my fund is it's a $125 million super early stage technology fund, and most of the effort that we put in is to either forming companies with entrepreneurs. So I'd be finding somebody like yourself, right? And I'm acting almost like the co-founder and starting a company with an idea that you have. So that would be about a quarter of our deals that we do that. The other 3/4 of our deals are mostly focused on you already have a few co-founders, you have an idea, and you probably have a product you can show me, but you don't have any revenue yet. So then my job is to make sure that we narrow that down and get it to the market and be able to get to the first set of proof of concepts and eventually get revenue. So my focus has been finding these exceptional technology. A lot of it is around data, the kind of fields I'm talking about. So I've recently funded several projects out of Berkeley, UC Berkeley. They had a lab called the Rice Lab. So we just funded a very remarkable founder, actually a guy here, Jan Stocker. Jan Stocker is a professor. So he founded 2 companies already. One is Databricks, right? Databricks have just raised $1 billion on $28 billion valuation. And the second one is Anyscale, which have raised over $65 million in the marketplace. And then we just formed a company with Jan to do these kind of like proprietary encrypted data. So I'm extremely excited. So I'm personally looking for projects like that. If I have a choice, I would have funded all these projects out of UC Davis's project, right? But we are still early as a school in terms of our entrepreneurship program. But ultimately, that would be like I'm a specialist in trying to harvest these kind of things and finding first-time entrepreneurs to go start the project. I'm starting in the earliest stage, and then I will take these companies all the way to including helping them get their first, what we call the Series A funding, the first round of serious funding to scale the company, as we have partners that we work with that generally fund those later stage. And that's been my mission. I've been on that mission doing this now for the past year plus. And it's just, I funded 8 companies, and this fund has another 32 companies at least to fund. So that's why when I hear an event like this, it's a great networking event for me to be able to get connected to all of you. Make sure all of you send me a LinkedIn invitation, and then I have a chance to know you and tell me what ideas do you have. And especially if, obviously most of our domain is in tech and in software, but if it's not in my domain, I'll refer you to somebody that I know also. This is part of the very critical thing that we all will have to do. By the way, the reason I do this and I come to this event is because I want to give back to the school. Everything I did and all of my original ideas came out of my research at UC Davis. So all I ask you is, one day that you become successful, you have to do the same. You have to give the school money, and you have to help the students in the same way that I participate.
Thank you. There's another question regarding your major. How valuable was your major in preparing you for your job and for your professional life? If there is something that you wish universities would teach differently or additionally to help prepare prospective entrepreneurs?
Now, let me make sure I totally understand, hear the question. So you said, how valuable what?
Your major was in your profession.
My major, okay. It was extremely important, I have to be honest with you. So I have studied computer science mostly around data structure my whole life. Now, obviously, when I first got into this field, doing network databases, it was super boring because our code was very low level. So I used to write most of my code in C. I know some of you guys still write code in C. C is fashionable again, C++ for sure. And it's lumpy, so you have to write a lot of code. And now, with scripting languages and stuff, you can write in this whole fashion of low code is very fashionable. But I have to say, the 4 years, well, I only did it in 3.5 years. My 3.5 years of my undergraduate work was to learn the basic of understanding how to be a good, software developer. And in my days, you have to learn from all the way from assembly language on hardware all the way up. So it's just knowing every nitty-gritty details of how things work how the computer work, allow me to have a whole different appreciation to understand efficiency, right? And writing beautiful code, which I think is extremely, sloppy code I just can't stand, right? Because I'm one of those people that are dumb enough to think that my codes are perfect and it has no bugs. Obviously, it's not true, right? But to me, it's the pride that I learned in my art. And then I think the Davis experience was very different. So originally I was intended to study a PhD at Davis. I quit halfway and I got a job and I have a master's degree from Davis. Graduate school, it's a whole different exercise. Graduate school, mostly I think undergraduate in some way too, but graduate school even more so. It's a place where it's for you to learn how to learn. That experience is like no others, because that's the place that allowed me to kind of explore things and invent things that the world don't even care. And it gives you the funding and the resources to do so. Like, when you guys graduate from the school, you look back, you'll say, oh my God, I could not believe how great a school that was. And the resources and the people and the things I could do with in the school, it's so remarkable. So I know I hire a lot of people that they are not a computer major, but they ended up in a computer job. But you all know, right? Why so many venture capitalists, they love to fund founder CEO, and why so many incredible technologists have become the best CEOs in the world, right? And like a Gates, right? A Larry Ellison, So because those keen eyes and the ability to be able to dissect what's important, what's not important at the product level will forever be a gift for all of us. So I do think that the major part of it is super crucial. It really is. But there are people just they have the ability to learn on the job. So they get 4 years of incredible undergraduate studies in all aspects of stuff, and end up most of the stuff they learn at the job. That I have also seen, but nothing's as easy as if you have the right major and it's all those learning is provided for you in advance. That's just so great.
And what do you think that universities should do differently to promote entrepreneurship, to train future entrepreneurs?
Yeah. So I think that's one of the things, obviously, that it would be kind of like the next phase you should see that UC Davis will be doing also. So I mentioned this name called the RISE Lab, right? So actually there were two versions of this lab that was created. You guys can look this up. RISE Lab still exists today at Berkeley. So there was a lab called the AMP Lab, AMP. So AMP Lab was back 10 years ago, and this is where a lot of the data science technology were created. I think they had like 3 or 4 professors who were leading the lab. It's the first time that they have a lab set up where there's no offices. Even the professors are mixed in with the group of all the engineers. So it's just one big room. And it's kind of the beginning of how the office workspace become really open, right? And it helps on the collaboration. And these labs only have a 5 years length. So it's really interesting because they have some undergraduate students. They have a bunch of graduate students, masters and PhDs. And we all know PhDs takes 5 to 6 years to get. So if your lab only have 5 years, you only have one of the two things going to happen. Either the project die or the project actually ended up become a commercial thing. So that's what happened to most of the projects inside the RISE Lab. So that is almost a forcing function. And they have created some remarkable companies, right? That's super valuable in the marketplace. And now we don't need a lab to do this at Davis. Each of you individually can put that in context and start creating things while you're at school and expecting, you go off and actually start a company. That really, it should be in your head now, right? So if you think that you wanted to, the only reason why you go work for someone, get a job, would be for 2 reasons. One, you have a big student loan that you have to pay back, okay? So cash comm is critical for you. That's, obviously it's the right thing to do. Or you still want to learn more. So on the job training, like you can work for a company like a Google or a Facebook, that's just so much learning to be had. It's almost like a research institute in many ways, right? It's remarkable. But the really most insatiable, like crazily great projects I've seen is directly from the university. I talk to free entrepreneurs from free university, directly straight out of university. They create these projects straight out of university today. One in cybersecurity, one in data, one in just process automation. Just today, right? I've seen, I would say, over 500 companies since March. 500 companies. I would say about maybe a quarter of them straight from universities. People like you guys, right? And I couldn't be more excited because the universities will allow people to invent almost stuff that has no boundary because you don't have to be that practical. And when the world is going to be all reinvented, we need non-practical things. We need everybody to think ultimately out of the box. So this is going to be your gift, in this place.
Thank you. And extending that question, how do you think, how do you find ideas for starting a company?
Well, now, by the way, this is the magic of having classmates. You don't have to be the one that have the best possible ideas. But look at Mark Zuckerberg, right? Facebook wasn't his ideas, right? He was the one that actually made it happen, right? But he was a very good picker. He was able to observe what people were working on, and then he rounded up enough people that could kind of get it off the ground. And then he took it from there with a big vision, and very ambitious vision to make it into a very successful company. So actually the most important thing, actually, while you guys are at the university is to find friends that are capable, right? So you don't have to do everything. So that's a very, very critical thing. So as I said earlier, right, co-founders are incredible people to have. So if you have a chance to go find, someone that's happened to be working on some incredible things, but maybe what they think of imagining the use case would be is not broad enough. That's when you add value, right? I'm almost think everything can be engineered, right? Because I'm an engineer, but incredible minds will have the ability to see things sometimes when someone's myopically working on it. That could be a classmate. This is the time to go find smart friends, seriously, right? That's how I see all the most incredible things that I funded straight out of university happen like that. They happen to be 3 or 4 people that they saw one person working on something very interesting. They all jumped on it, but actually not the originator of the project is somebody else that found out, oh, actually this is very useful in these 3 cases. And then they build the rest of the software to cater to them. So think about that. So all those conversations in the cafeteria, or actually now maybe somewhere in the dormitory, you're chatting over Zoom or somewhere else, is critical now to capture what are they working on. Be curious, right? And don't be shy. Ask to join them. Ask to help, right? That's how these kind of projects turn into company happens.
Thank you. Why do a lot of startups fail? From your experience, what is the primary reason behind it?
Yeah, I think mostly is they're not realistic and they spend too much money. Scrappiness is a very crucial thing in the world that we're in now, right? Things can be so capital efficient, right? As I said, now you have cloud, you have, you can connect the resources all over the place in the world. We no longer have boundary. Almost all the companies are now decentralized. So you can have resources in India, you can have resources in South America, you can have resources in Eastern Europe, everywhere, right? And everybody will show up and you think they all just happen to be working from home. So to be very efficient and to be very smart to know when do you actually cut things off and stop. So remember earlier, I talked about, how the journey of starting a company is never a straight line, by the way. I never seen a company don't have to make a turn. Some drastic one, we have a term for this, actually it's called pivot, right? So there's small pivots that you're making 10, 20 degree adjustment in the course of either technology or your go-to-market. Some will make 90 degrees, they do totally different things. Now, I recall this got to be like maybe 8 or 9 years ago. Slack, lots of you use Slack. Slack started as a game platform company called TinySpec in Vancouver, British Columbia. they basically ran out of money. So Stuart Butterfield decided, wow, what do I do now? They happened to have developed a technology, which is the original form of Slack, to use internally, because there wasn't really an instant messaging technology for in-house use. And he saw an opportunity and said, well, let's try to go pitch this to our existing investors to see if they have appetite to move into it. There were a lot of skepticism because that ultimately had to be sold to enterprise, which they would know nothing about, right? But it worked, it stuck. So you have to expect these kind of things happen, but the reason why a start failed is people get very stubborn and then they tapped out, they run out of money. The reason they failed is only always down to one thing, is they run out of money. So you always have to think, you have to give yourself room and say, how can I go raise more money? So if you ever loses that buffer to be able to stop, pivot, and to go seek that new money, then it dies. So it's super critical at all times that you always have to have a reflection to say, am I still working on the right thing? Or this is just no longer practical. Flexibility is one of the biggest elements of a successful entrepreneur. You don't want to get stuck, right? Because proving a point is not what we're here for. We're here to make the thing successful, and lots of people use it.
Very true. What is the most important experience that shaped your leadership ability? What made you learn more about leadership?
I remember I was in my 20s. So, I was an engineer at Sun, and I was working on database stuff, and the company was growing really fast. When I joined it, there were 1,000 people, and I was there for 9 years. So when I left, there were almost 20,000 people. And almost the whole company was in one building when I first joined. And the only thing that I noticed was I said, it's tough to work for someone, right? And I said to myself, my managers suck. He doesn't really tell me exactly what I need to do. What can I do to please him, right? He wasn't clear what the assignment was. So I have to go find all that stuff out. And I said, I'm a guy that fresh out of school. How would I know, right? So I know what the business needs. So I didn't know anything. But then I figured out, I said, okay, what's the difference between me and him, right? Now, back then, actually, I said, one difference I clearly saw was he wears a tie. I said, I didn't own one, so maybe that's a problem. Okay, but that's a very inexpensive thing to acquire. And number two is he can present. Now, this is before PowerPoint was invented. We have to use a thing called FrameMaker. Actually, the CEO of Frame Technology is actually my next door neighbor, the guy who founded it. And it's tough, right? And then I said, and I have to stand in front of people to present stuff. I was just like, the first time I had to do it, I was so out of my mind. But then the thing that inspired me was I said, okay, I really want to be the guys in charge. And I said, if I'm in charge, I'm sure I'm going to be a better manager. I don't know if I ever become a better manager, but I assure myself that I said, you know what? I don't want to be the guy just doing the assignment. I want to be the guy that assigning the work to do. So for me, if you don't lead, you're going to be led. You only have two choices. Which way do you want it, right? There's a whole lot more fun to be a leader. I have to tell you that. So I didn't think it was an option for me, even though I'm by nature, I know you guys are not going to believe me, right? I'm an extraordinarily shy and introverted guy. But I didn't have many friends when I was in college or in graduate school. I really didn't. But I found out that doesn't work in real life, right? In real life, the people that get admired are the people that can stand on the stage with tens of thousands of people below them, and they're mesmerized of what they have to say. So if I didn't learn that skill, and I couldn't lead thousands of people, I cannot achieve the results I want. I'll be one of those people in the room, right, being led. And I said, that's just not going to be fun. So I have to lead. I don't have a choice, right? So to me, it becomes a necessity. And I think, thank God, I kind of did, right? I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be talking to you guys today. So I think that's crucial, right? By the way, that's totally is developable. It's not, leadership is not born with. And everybody tell you that, including your parents, right? They're full of crap. It's not true. Leadership is something you definitely develop, especially in your 20s. It all comes right at where you guys are at right now. if you determine to be a leader, you will become one. Now it's so easy. There's so many examples to study from because communication is so widely available, right? And all of you deserve to be leaders. You're Aggie.
That's so true. I guess we will end the event right now. We are already about time. Thanks a lot for attending.
Well, this is a tremendous amount of fun. I'm so glad that we kind of can do this casually, and I see everybody's face on the Zoom screen also. I've always wanted to do this actually instead of coming in to lecture in a class because that's more one way. And I've gone through a bunch of slides and stuff. I much rather have this conversation actually. And I'm so glad that we were able to do it in a style. So, it would be my delight to do this again anytime that you want to. But please connect with me on LinkedIn. If I can be helpful to you in any way, shape, or form, I really want to. Right? I feel that it's my duty to do so. And I really need to start funding a bunch of UC Davis entrepreneurs. Right? All of you guys. So please go figure out something interesting to do, find some interesting friends and make magical things happen. I'm counting on you guys.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you guys. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.